We're planting a flag here, making a claim. This is really the gravity for people, ideas, and capital. There's creative collisions happening all the time. Austin is the convergence of atoms, bits, and intelligence, and we are a bio and health tech innovation leader.
Ignite your curiosity with Austin Next. I explore how ecosystems are built and how tech shapes the future. Austin is the frontier. It's where innovation takes root and new myths are made. Join what's next.
So I want to talk about Austin's rise as a bio and health frontier powerhouse. And what does that actually mean? So a quick snapshot. We got over 20,000 people here, over 1,000 companies, almost 10 million square feet of bio and health space, whether that be lab space to biomanufacturing to clinical space. Over 40 companies are valued at over $100 million, and we've raised just in bio and health almost $5 billion over the last, since 2020. That has an ecosystem valuation, the valuation of both our public and private companies in bio and health at $42 billion. Now, when we think about that compared to something like Boston, they've got about maybe 10x what we do. But I'll show you in a little bit. It's the growth rate, which is something that's unbelievably different. We're also now top 10 in VC funding, and we have had a 70% rise. When you hear about brain drain, it's a brain gain here. So everybody is moving here, and I don't care, again, what any of these people are saying. It keeps going. So first off is we are climbing up the ranking. So, and it was funny, I was looking at these slides earlier today. The ranking of where we are depends on when I made the slides. So, we were ranking between 8th and 9th nationally, according to Deal Room, in VC funding. And when you look at Carta's data in both their subsections are health tech, biotech, and med device, we rank 7th with over 5%, 2%. Med device wasn't on this, but I guess if you probably put that on, we're probably about the same as well. So, as I said here, look at that trajectory. In 2017, we were 24th in the country in VC funding. This year, we are already 8th and likely going to be hitting, fighting for 5th. So, as you can kind of see, it was a pop-up during the kind of the bubble years, took a bit of a step back, but still much higher than it kind of was previously, with about $500 million per year. And now we're sitting at $500 million as of right now. So I think we'll probably be getting close to $1 billion, and I can tell you that there's some deals yet to be announced that are kind of in the ecosystem that are definitely going to push us over the top. Now, we talked about that ecosystem valuation. As you can kind of see, it's got this nice little hockey stick thing going for it. So again, there was this really baseline what the bio and health ecosystem was for the last 10, 20 years, and then the inflection point in 2017, which, by the way, fits also what Austin as a whole. If you look at just funding and startups and unicorns, that same kind of year had that inflection point where really we've kind of taken off into a new level, both with the people that are moving here, the capital that's here, the homegrown talent, exits, et cetera. So this is just a splash of kind of all the companies that are either based here or, and some of them you'll hear, like Paradromus you'll hear from today, that are based here and have offices or are founded here worth over $100 million. And the funny thing is we are always adding to this list, and there's things that we can constantly finding out that are under the radar and still kind of popping up. The biggest thing is people say, okay, so where's the capital, right? We're really having a triple convergence of capital. So one, existing Texas VCs like Capital Factory are expanding rapidly into bio and health. National firms like 8VC and Briar Capital are moving here who have a strong focus on bio and health. And lastly is there are new and specialized firms popping up all the time looking at this space. So we're planting a flag here, making a claim. This is really the gravity for people, ideas, and capital. There's creative collisions happening all the time. Austin is the convergence of atoms, bits, and intelligence, and we are a bio and health tech innovation leader. So this is the only time I'm going to kind of go down the line. But could you please introduce yourself and why you chose to move to Austin?
Yeah, hi, Steve Hahn. I started my career as a physician at the University of Pennsylvania Oncology, did research and took care of patients, and then went to MD Anderson, where I became a tech in 2014. Went to the FDA for 14 very eventful.
Audio.
Up.
Button. Push the button.
Never done this before. I don't know what's going on. Was at MD Anderson since 2014, and then went to the FDA for 14 very eventful months during COVID, and then decided to join the private sector and joined a venture innovation firm called Flagship Pioneering in Cambridge, and have become the CEO of a cancer diagnostic company called Harbinger Health. Moved to Austin, honestly, because one, we wanted to come back to Texas after Washington, but two, our little baby girl who's 29 lives here, so. But I've not looked back, and I'm very happy to be here.
We brought my parents with me when we moved here, so yeah.
That's great. Hi, I'm Charlie Taylor. I started my career at Stanford as a professor in School of Medicine and School of Engineering, spent 14 years there. Had an idea, was starting to actually build a technology combining imaging and computing to improve the diagnosis of cardiovascular disease, and then spun that out of the university in 2010. So started a company, HeartFlow, in 2010. I always say that my investors said I needed to spend more time if they were going to, put more money into the company. Actually, I left the university at that time, 2010. Spent 13 years focusing on building that company, and it's still a private company, a unicorn, raised almost $1 billion of capital so far. And has a big office. Actually, the biggest office is here in Austin. So 8 years ago, I opened up an office in Austin. I think I was a little bit ahead of the curve, but just the connection with tech, the connection with the university, and also I thought it was a really stable place, not running the risk of earthquakes in California or snowstorms or hurricanes in the East Coast. Little did I know, but the ice storm happened the year after and shut our production facility down. But anyways, it's all good. So HeartFlow has a big office here. And then in the end of 2023, I was starting to think about what I was going to do next in my career. Came for a visit several months later to UT, met the Dean of Medicine, director of the Odin Institute, also the director of Odin Institute for Computational Engineering and Science, and just with the idea of giving them advice about a program in computational medicine, and offered me a job and said, why don't you come here and lead a program? So came back into an academic environment, started in January. Actually, my wife is back in California today. The movers are at our house today. So it's all happening, but I couldn't be more excited about being here in Austin. Love the city.
Awesome. It's a great excuse not to have to move your house, right? Like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Kind of. So my baby girls are 4 and 1, so I don't have the excuse of, and by the way, I heard great things about HeartFlow from Leo Grady. It's a
great.
previous investor of mine. So I'm Micah. My formal background is very far. So first of all, imposter syndrome, but my background is a master's in math, PhD in cognitive sciences. I've been an AI entrepreneur for the last 15, 16 years, built more companies than I'd be willing to admit. Some have even been successful. Sold a company a while back for about $600 million and decided to go into trying to change the world and impact health, so looking at the intersection of AI and biology. Moved to Austin actually out of Israel almost 4 years ago. It's insane. Some of our investors at a previous company were based here. We didn't really know if we wanted to be East Coast, West Coast. We thought we would try it out, and we never left. So I guess we like it here. So that's what brought us here. And what I do now is a co-founder and CEO of a company called Somite Therapeutics. We just closed our Series A, which was nearly $50 million by Khosla Ventures, and we're leveraging artificial intelligence in order to discern, decipher cell signaling patterns in order to bring forward cell replacement therapy. So something that is quite topical these days.
Yeah.
So, as you saw, I'm calling Austin the frontier, and I mean that not just geographically, but philosophically. What does that mean to you? And if you think I'm getting high on my own metaphors, please feel free to tell me that.
Well, I don't think you're getting high on your metaphors, and I wasn't quite sure when I saw the question if you meant geographic, so that is a boundary between, say, two countries, or frontier as, sort of the next place where things are going to get done, and I think that latter definition really fits. And one of the things I really like about Austin, and I think the environment, is that because the incentives are so misaligned in medicine, and because we haven't in medicine learned the lessons the very good lessons that have made tech successful in a variety of different areas. That interface, I think, could be very useful to helping us get to the next place. And why Austin? Because I think people here approach things in a way where they're believing that being disruptive and changing the current paradigm, and I do believe that the folks who live here can accept that. So, we think about companies like Function Health, et cetera, that are really on this wellness sort of approach to things. It's where the world needs to go. And we need to disrupt what's going on right now, because I don't think any of the stakeholders are satisfied. I think this is the place where it can happen.
Well, and I've thought before, and I've written about this, is that there are no trillion-dollar bio and health companies. The closest that you're getting, I think, is either Eli or Novo right now, and they're kind of popping up, but they are not transformational companies. They're transformational products. Yeah. They happen to be a collection of assets that all have similar customers. If we want to look at, to your point about tech and how that lines in, it is integrated products. It is, marketing. It's a full stack of things that go together, not just a pull in and out of different assets.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And my personal belief, and I've spoken to y'all about this before, is that company that develops something that empowers the healthcare consumer to own and action his or her own data is going to win at this game and could be a trillion-dollar company. Yeah. Because it's a big problem we have.
I would also say I don't think it's going to be an existing, big tech company right now, to tell you the truth. I think it's going to be a new company, perhaps that we don't know about yet, that's going to be a disruptor. So I think it's just something different about healthcare and about technology that I think, coming from spending the last 30 years plus in Silicon Valley and having seen a lot of, quite frankly, big tech companies that are really trying to lean into healthcare, I think it's it's kind of a different skill sets. I think it's going to be a new disruptive company that's going to be able to do this ultimately. But if I could just comment quickly on the point about the frontier, I'll tell you what again, spending last 3 decades in the valley, in Silicon Valley, in Palo Alto, Atherton, Menlo Park area, being close to Sand Hill Road and all the investment, all the capital there, at Stanford, it's not hard to go out and come out in that environment to go start a company. But I think the truth is that it's like when you're at the top, you're not really, the people that got you to the top or that got you to be the number one ecosystem are not always the ones that are there afterwards. So I think having an insurgent mentality, Austin, this kind of frontier spirit, I think that's what's going to create the next leaders. I think it's very difficult when you're kind of sitting on the top to stay there and to maintain that level of excellence. I think it's true with some of the big tech companies, quite frankly. I think it's going to be hard for them to stay where they're at, in their positions. And I think it's going to take new ideas, new people, new environments to create, what's next in healthcare.
Well, I think it's also this, I know it's kind of out of vogue already, but like Paul Graham's founder mode, manager mode, right?
Yeah.
And this hunger that happens when you're a founder. I mean, just something like tech, right? Like if anybody but Mark Zuckerberg was running Meta, when they changed the course to Meta, he would have been fired. Because it clearly didn't pivot, or at least didn't work initially. We'll see where it goes in the long term. But now they're like killing it in AI because he's still running the place and still driving it into that way. If he was the manager, he would have been replaced and they would have gone and they'd still be just Facebook.
So a few comments there. One, talking about the frontier. So, I wasn't born and raised in the U.S. It's a little hard. For me, it's a frontier just not being out of the province of Israel. But more seriously, so our company is founded, I'm based in Austin, obviously, but I fly out every week to Boston because our company was actually formed by 3 National Academy of Science members who are Harvard faculty. And when I was first introduced to them, they called me the cowboy from Texas, not the Israeli. So, but the reason I say that actually is because if I were on the West Coast, if I were in Silicon Valley, I would likely not have been open to the opportunity that was in Boston, like it was. So that was a plus. And
Everybody
in terms
becomes
of
the
the
cowboy here, whether we like it or not. You know?
And in terms of the trillion-dollar company, first, so talking about Zuckerberg, CZI is actually an investor of ours, and it's really nice to see how their spirit actually infiltrates all the way, and how much they're pushing the frontier and pushing us hard to kind of get to help get the virtual model of the cell kind of out there. In terms of the next trillion-dollar company, first of all, to be fair, I think there are like 5 or 6 companies like that in the world, right? So saying that
I think we're like at 8, but
maybe,
yeah.
But I don't know how many different verticals they do represent. So not like having health not there, like I think what is Lilly, like 500, 600, 700 these
Something
days?
like that, yeah.
But more to the point about the prediction of where that comes from. So I think that company does exist already now. If I had to guess, like I think isomorphic is a chance of that. They're building spin out of Google or DeepMind, Demis's new company. I think they raised off the bat like 650 million, which is meaningless. But what is meaningful is that they're leveraging these foundation models, right? AlphaFold 3. And in their specific case, also modeling interactions between molecules and proteins, and literally building not a product exactly as you said, not even a platform or products, but an engine of discovery of multiple platforms, if you will. Building themselves out much more like a tech company would. That's my, if I had to bet on one company.
But just going off script in the best way. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Steve, in this, because when you think about isomorphic, you think about SoMite, or you think about these companies that are really creating these engines as they go forward, the FDA is not built for that.
This is where you're going to quote me later on. So that's absolutely true. And I was at Harvard recently lecturing to some medical students, and someone in the front row raised her hand and said, so we're learning in this world of AI-enabled learning, et cetera, is the rest of the world going to be able to, is the rest of medicine going to be able to keep up? Which I thought was a really interesting way to put it. But I think that's also true about the FDA, is that it is kind of stuck in paper and PDF. And if you want a reviewer to go back and look at the last 10 applications for, a monoclonal antibody for Alzheimer's disease, they have to go do it manually. So I don't think that's the case, but I do think we have an opportunity on the other side, now being in the industry side, to actually open up the books for them and make it easy for them to do the right thing. Because at the end of the day, one of the advice that I give to companies all the time is, you make it easy for the reviewer to make that decision about risk-benefit, and that is, get access to the data that they need, et cetera. Help them understand what your modeling is about, because they care about that. So your models and the engines that you're using, they're going to care about that in terms of the safety risk aspect to this. But they're going to have to play catch up. We're seeing that right now. Hopefully the efforts that they're making will get better. But I do think that what we are going to start using in industry to help us do the regulatory side of things, the agency has to get there, and it can't take 10 years.
Well, and I think also, one, you have just the connection, right? You have, okay, I have to give you this 1 billion paperwork, and then you have to do the review it. I know they've released their new AI tool, which I think is great, but also just structurally, which is everything is set about as a singular asset. Here's my asset, here's all the trials I did it, you approve it, oh, you want to change it? Okay, start over, go through that. We saw recently in the news, you had that, bespoke CRISPR and have one for the baby. How do you, you're going to do an FDA approval for every one? That doesn't make any sense.
So, Jason, and I'll stop talking seriously. So you hit, of course, a number of things that are critical to this particular issue. One is the N of 1 and rare diseases. You can't do things the way that you did in the past. And so there are ways to design, and FDA has guidance on this, to design those approaches to actually accelerate. But I think a couple things have happened. One is platform technology designation that allows a company to use pre-existing data and maybe other folks' data to actually expand that and cut some of the regulatory red tape further. And then I think the other part of it is, I think the agency now, for whatever turmoil we're seeing, and we're seeing tons of turmoil, is really thinking about what's the way that you help innovators develop products. And part of it is, let us have less people dependence on the reviewer side. The other part of it is, let's shorten the innovation cycle. So more on safety, a little bit of efficacy, just like an EUA during COVID. And then let's go to the real world, where, let's face it, we're going to get the best information about a product's performance. And so I see us moving in that direction, and I think that will speed innovation, and I think it will shorten the regulatory cycle.
You know, I've just speaking from experience that I had with the FDA, with the agency, we had to bring a software product, AI product through the FDA. And my experience is that if you can build a really constructive relationship, built upon trust, where you're really open, transparent about the information, the data, if you, as a founder, have a high bar, quite frankly, I would always tell the people at the FDA, I'm going to care more about quality of my product than you will. I promise you that. When you have that perspective, then you can actually start to do things more flexibly. Because as a software company, we started off in the process of trying to go through a PMA, process with software. It would have been a nightmare. We ended up with a de novo 510K, but we also ended up with a very constructive process with the FDA that we could do, software updates every week, every 2 weeks with letters to file, and to behave as a software company. We did several hundred releases, new product releases, through that process. But it started with a constructive relationship with the FDA. But in my view, from digital health, from healthcare, for instance, or AI in healthcare, for example, the bottleneck is not on the regulatory side. There's 1,000 FDA cleared AI products right now. The bottleneck is integration into clinical practice. It's on the payment side, on the healthcare payment side. And I think, that what I'm really focused on here in Austin is how do we build a digital healthcare ecosystem? How do we start to, make this to be one of the signature opportunities we have in the city? And why I'm here is in part because the new hospital that's going to get built, that's going to be digital first. And I think from an opportunity from Austin perspective, it's an extraordinary opportunity because, having spent 30 years at Stanford Hospital, we built a new hospital. It was modeled after the old one. So it's a challenge to build a brand new academic medical center in the city, but it's this extraordinary opportunity to build something new and different, that's right for the city, that maybe is contemporary, has a contemporary or futuristic view of healthcare. I think this is going to be a major asset as we go forward in the city of Austin.
When you think about the technological change that we're happening and what's going on in the bioinnovation tech stack, and so many of them, to your point, like they don't fit into the system the way it's nicely like, okay, here is a 10% better medical device, here's a 20% better therapeutic, switch it out, now it goes into the system. And I think about back almost to that frontier model is we're having to ask those questions here. We're having to say, like, we're building these entirely new engines, these entirely new ways of doing it, that we have to actually build businesses around them. And I think when you think about things like DelMed and the new hospitals coming up, but it's not just all the technological aspects of it. It's how do we interact with the city? How do we interact with these innovators in a way that starts to make sense and may look different? Maybe it won't be here's your procedure, here's your reimbursement, done.
Yeah.
It's speaking of the N equals one, when you think about the future therapy, specifically in my world in cell therapy, so if you even start thinking of autologous cell therapies and needing to approve a bank of cells for a specific person, like how would you even go about that these days? And taking it one step forward, how much of the regulatory work could be obviated by in silico models, right? And fast-tracked there. I do want to say that for ourselves, for our own interactions with the agency, they've actually been incredible. We received the orphan drug designation beautifully with a lot of great feedback, and or received extremely nicely, especially being on the cusp of kind of frontier stuff. So it's that was Google listening to me. Sorry. But I do think that you talked about moving away from paper and PDF. It's going to be much more than that, in my opinion. If we're going to be keeping up with companies, if the agency is going to be keeping up with companies that are developing novel drugs using in silico modeling, they're going to need to meet them early on, so as not to. Otherwise, it's just going to still take 10 plus years, despite being able to develop these drugs much faster. And if we want the agency not to be a bottleneck, that will need to change.
And what's interesting about what, Mickey, you just said is that if you think about the old way the FDA approved vaccines, et cetera, they basically redid the experiments that the inventors did.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is if they actually had the tools that you have for your business and then could apply them internally in their own way to verify what you submitted and do it quickly, efficiently, and be confident of it, that would really speed the process.
You could even have, I completely agree, and they could even have a request for drugs. Like literally, they could be a forward-thinking agency actually putting together the models, saying these are the areas, these are the type of molecules that we believe that targets, and we can fast-track them.
Yep.
So I want to get to I think we could go very deep on how all the ways to fix the FDA. I want a little reaction to the numbers and that I shared with you guys and both on the valuations and the funding and so forth. So my question, we've all been here at different lengths of time. Does it feel like there's been a shift? Does it feel like there's been that momentum? Is it kind of coming under the radar? How is you kind of feeling about the ecosystem when you see kind of the growth?
I'm just going to say I'm probably the newest one here, so it's hard for me to look at that through the context. Other than that, I brought Harflow's office in 8 years ago. So
as the newest one, what was the reputation? What were you seeing from the outside? Were you hearing any of this?
I don't think I was hearing that. Austin is, Austin was always a hot place for tech and for innovation, and it was obvious to me. I mean, coming into the city, it reminded me of Silicon Valley, 30 years ago. I was surprised when I started coming back. You just see the cranes, downtown and the building that's going on. It reminded me of Shanghai in 2000. What was happening in the city, in that time frame, or Silicon Valley as it was being built when I first arrived in the early 1990s. Kind of before the dot-com, growth and boom, et cetera. So it has that vibe to me. I think though that the best years are really ahead of us, and I really kind of get back to, I think, what's going to happen in the city in healthcare. I think it's going to be absolutely singularly transformative, because I go back to Stanford. They're not going to build a new hospital. They're not going to disrupt healthcare, building a new healthcare system. Mass General, the Brigham, they're not going to do that in Boston. It's not going to happen anywhere else. So I think what we're going to see over the course of the next 5 years is a complete kind of reimagination of healthcare and healthcare delivery here in the city. And I think it's going to be, incredibly transformative over that time frame. But it has, being here since I arrived in January, it's vastly exceeded my expectations. I had very high expectations, but in terms of everything, especially, the vibe, the culture, the openness, the energy, the interest in doing new things and creating new things is I just didn't feel that in the Valley. Silicon Valley had that 30 years ago, but I don't think it has it now.
It's not only the innovation, but also the warmth of the people and the support.
Yeah.
So there are a few, so yours and Yanni's evenings for entrepreneurs, for health tech entrepreneurs, are basically better than anything I've had in Silicon Valley or anywhere else. Like the quality of the people that you put together, the support system that you've been able to create, the Breyer Summit, which is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, it's and towards the question about the atmosphere of fundraising, was that
just the numbers and does it you feel it on the kind of in the air, even on the numbers?
So I mean, I don't think it's a secret that biotech is experiencing a nuclear winter right now in terms of fundraising, right? Like to just call it the way, at least. So first of all, we're not biotech, we're tech bio. It's a huge difference, right? And our AI is real.
Same letters.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Like tech med.
Yes, exactly. It reminds me, one of my dear investors said that when I pitched him, he said, "Look, I know about AI so much that if it had one more letter, I couldn't spell it." So it's at least for earlier stage companies that are still seeking product market fit or still early on their path to clinic or to partnerships. Fundraising is not easy now. There's the multiple companies trading at a quarter of their of the cash on books, right? Like their market cap is, it really takes the ability to show that you'd actually be able to drive an engine or create this quote unquote foundation model, much like, look, AlphaFold which won the AlphaFold 3, was it 2 or 3 that won the Nobel Prize last year? I mean, we're still not seeing the economic ramifications of it, right? It's still it's a beautiful piece of science, but it still is to be proven in terms of what drugs it yields. And I think the forward-thinking investors get that. It's like investing in OpenAI well before it had a business model, years before. 10 years from now, it will be like, how did we not see that we're like literally these, I don't know if it's isomorphic or chai or whatever, are sitting on these engines literally that are creating literally companies each worth billions and billions of dollars.
And it's people not in the space. I mean, when you look at like Sam's blogs or Dario's blog, they all talk about the AI's effect on health.
Oh, look at the people pouring in money. I mean, the ARC Institute, right? Tech founders entirely, right? CZI, another example. Mm-hmm. They're pouring money into these huge models, betting on the future of, again, a definition of foundation model is trained on general set, but it's able to solve multiple problems across a discipline, right? OpenAI is so powerful because nobody trained it on translation yet. It's able to translate really, really good, and a million other tasks. And I think that's what we're going to see in medicine as well. Just being able to unlock entirely new frontiers that we're not even aware of now.
I think this is going to happen, but to tell you the truth, people, having started a company 15 years ago that's still private, you start out as a story, right? There's a lot of good stories out there, but people are going to have to build real companies, with revenue, because eventually you have to become a revenue story. You have to actually talk about building a real business and making money, and that is the integration into healthcare system. There's so much promise, and it's so exciting to see what's going on right now. But there's going to be a lot of work to go from that promise and that excitement to building real companies that are going to be transformative. They're going to get paid, are going to get fully integrated into healthcare systems, and that's going to be ahead of us, And I think Austin is very well positioned to be able to do that, to have a big role in these new opportunities in healthcare.
Well, I think, and getting back to what you said, like the XBI is down pretty much, and there's the nuclear winter of biotech, and it's funny because they are, when you have companies like tech or then the convergence of biohealth and tech, they actually do have to think about revenue.
Yeah.
Versus
how do you make
most
money?
of those companies are, little flip, like they're built to flip, right? We're creating this asset, and hopefully Pfizer, J&J, Merck, somebody buys this, or Medtronic, or whatever, and that's it. And so they're not thinking about revenue. They're not thinking about, and I think that becomes, there's a bit of a break in what I think we're seeing, that it's a lot of, it's the coastless, it's the CZIs, it's the 8 VCs, the founders that are investing into this new space, because the current bio and health VC ecosystem, it tends to think about just the asset. Like, what do you do this? How good is the asset? Then you're going to sell, good. Then we'll go get another asset.
Value accrues to assets.
Yes.
Always. And platforms, historically, those that did not have a product were not successful until they had a product, right?
Yeah.
In
Yeah,
biotech,
absolutely.
yeah.
It's one of those things. It happens slowly then quickly.
Yeah. Well, I think
Hemingway.
I think a lot about that is like, how do you build a platform versus how do you kind of focus on individual verticals and products? Because it's not hard these days to go out there and to get very large initial valuations, to raise large Series A funds with a great story and a great platform story. But the challenge is that how do you go from that platform to a product that is going to be fully integrated, fully paid for, for instance, in a healthcare system. And every platform company that starts is going to have to go build products, right? And they're going to have to sell products, and they're going to have to get those products paid for specific, indications.
So two things. A, it is hard to go out and raise an A, even with a great story. That's
Yeah,
number one.
I know.
But to your point, and I think going back to Austin, so if you think of East Coast versus West Coast, right, and around platforms, right? So East Coast, Boston is all about the asset, right? Historically, right? Yeah. And a model that really doesn't lend itself to standard tech VC, right? Yeah. Like the horizons of return, the multipliers, the risk, right? Which is completely not dependent on the founder model of like founder mode. On the West Coast,
It's platforms.
It's platforms, right? And
That's
the asset, right? And Austin is right in the middle.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a great
yeah.
point. And I see that, again, knowing a bunch of founders in the Valley, in Silicon Valley, who have, I won't name names, but have started great platform healthcare companies, and they raise a big check, put $100 million into a Series A, and then, oh crap, a couple of years later, you're starting to get kind of the rubber hits the road, and you're having to kind of build the verticals and the products, and that's not close by, and things get upside down in those companies. But I think it's a great point, is that we can figure out how to be between, the platforms and in the products that could do something different.
So, Mika, I do want to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, and for Soman, is that you're the only person here, right? And a lot of the company is in Boston, and so, but I want to be frank about it, right? Like, is it due to the origin of the technology and coming out of Harvard? Is it a talent gap? Is it what is it needed to be?
Gap. So actually, when we were setting up our labs, so it's only the origin, right? Like flying out 3 chaired professors out to Austin once a week is not something you can easily do.
If you raised bigger, you could get a plane.
Exactly. Yes, it would be. Yes, exactly. I hope this is not recorded. No, I'm joking.
Don't listen to it. Don't spend money on a plane.
Yes. So it was actually, there were good reasons to set things up in Austin. Specifically, some of our a good friend and an investor, an early angel in us, sold Luminex to Diasorin, right? And we're developing, amongst other things, a new modality using semi-permeable capsules to basically generate cell signaling data. And the exact expertise is in Austin, coming out of Luminex, people that I've befriended and it's really close. And I was like, hey, would you be willing to take the job and fly out to Boston once we can? Hell no, right? But incredible people, and also, as I mentioned earlier, just very warm and supportive. So I would absolutely love to eventually set up a wet lab here. Prices are lower here significantly. Talent is cheaper here. There are many less venture-backed companies, or at least companies backed by Silicon Valley, with all the hype around here. So it would be easier for us. So it's almost it's quite unfortunate in the sense that we're tied, at least at the beginning, to Boston. But otherwise, I think the number one reason to actually set up an office in Austin would be how open and generous and warm the people are. And that is, you spoke about Silicon Valley 30 years ago. I don't know. I wasn't born. I was born, but I'm joking. I'm probably older than you. But more seriously, the level of support that you get here from founders that are much more experienced. I mentioned Leo Grady previously, who was flying out and just connected me with a lot of people, including, you mentioned 8VC, including literally the top dogs that are willing to actually take a call and help out and open and connect. So there's some wonderful people here, and the ecosystem is extremely supportive. It's not sardonic or cynical yet at all. That would be the number one reason for me. And there's no dearth of talent here. That's for sure. It's more of
is it going down a layer on the talent? Would you say it's a different mix of talent? Okay, look, you're going to be, when you think about the first principles of ecosystems and where that is, there's a reason why OpenAI, Anthropic, all of those are in the you're going to build a generalized foundational AI model. Of course you're going to do it in the Bay that's has a hyper concentration. So from your perspective, are you seeing, X type of talent is great in Boston, missing here, we have Y?
Look, for foundation models, you're right about Silicon Valley, that talent density there is just higher, not only than Austin, but the entire world, and multiple folds. I'm comparing to a different hub. I come from originally from Jerusalem, but spent 10 years in Tel Aviv before moving out. Tel Aviv is, I think, probably ranked among the top 20 cities, probably higher even in terms of talent density. I'm trying to compare that to Austin. I think it's not about talent density. It's a little bit more about the intensity of people are very happy here, and I think Paul Graham, who I have my issues with, has a great piece on the correlation between cities and aspirations. And he talks about what people are willing to sacrifice in order to be in a city, and talks about Boston. You're going to need to really want to excel in academics if you're willing to put up with those winters, for example. For Austin, I do think it attracts people that are non-standard, the cowboys, basically.
Founders, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, people with a founder's mentality. I think,
for
I
sure.
think there's going to be more of that here than I mean, if I just jump in on Valley and Silicon Valley, I think the challenge that I felt this direct experience is that for small companies, for startups, and we're talking about kind of biohealth, where, again, my premise is that most of this is going to come from new companies that are going to get started. To be blunt, in Silicon Valley, it's like a lot of big tech companies have kind of consumed all of the resources. I mean, it's like people that, to hire. I mean, when I hired a few people from Meta, from Google, et cetera, you're paying these people a shitload of money. Sorry, more in my French, right? A lot of money. And oftentimes, quite frankly, from a cultural perspective, that don't often fit into the startup mentality, the startup culture. So I think that kind of pioneer spirit from an entrepreneurial perspective, from a founder perspective, I think there's an opportunity to really foster that. And I don't see the same thing in Silicon Valley, to tell you the truth. Not now, not anymore. And I think that's going to be a real asset. For me, the biggest challenge I look at is like kind of organization around capital. Like, when you're going out to start a company in the Valley, you march, drive up and down Sand Hill Road, you know exactly where to get access to capital. It's much easier probably than it is so far in Austin. So I think it's going to be the investment community that, at different stages of investment, that is going to really need to lean in to be able to make this work, in the city.
So I'm going to throw something out because I'd love both of you to opine on this. And when I went to Boston and the venture innovation firm I'm at, the thought was, well, we have Mass General, we have the Brigham, we have the Dana-Farber, we have the Broad, we have MIT. We have this fertile ground, and people that we can go to who are in our Rolodex that can help us solve problems. It's a great environment to be together and actually solve those problems. Now, we talk about the talent in our company that's very AI-based. All of our data science people live outside of Boston and work remotely. So you can argue whether that's good or bad, but that is a trend that a lot of folks see. So my question to you is, where's the university on this? I'm so glad you're here. What's the importance of those interactions? There's a medical school, but there's not a hospital associated with the medical school. Yeah. And so it sounds like we're trying to solve those problems, but how important is that to the mix?
Honestly, I think it's going to be incredibly important. And I think the fact that it has to get built from scratch, from ground up, with a mentality, quite frankly, an extraordinary group of people that have been brought in that have had experience building healthcare systems, but have also this kind of, frontier mentality when it comes to healthcare. I think that's what's going to be important, because that doesn't exist right now. Again, having gone through that capital project at Stanford, with the adult and children's hospital, it just doesn't exist. There's somebody who's really, that's a question.
So going back to the comment made earlier, that the barrier is not the FDA approval, but it is in the actual implementation of next care. And we all know that best care today is about 20 to 30 years behind the science.
Yeah.
So what needs to happen to close that gap? We need to fire the medical association so we can go faster?
I'd love to jump in.
Go, you want to take that? I'm not going to
hold
get
you back.
quoted for anything
So seriously,
like
if you don't actually quote what I say, I would.
It is being recorded.
Okay, well, I know that. I'm just prefacing my comment. I think the system needs to be, I could say something really dramatic, but it needs to be completely reconfigured. It is not working now.
I agree.
And what I love about what you're doing is you're creating in that hospital a laboratory for clinical utility and implementation. Because I can promise you 100 things, 100 times, if it doesn't fit into the doctor's workflow, it doesn't matter how good it is. And we have tried to prove this. Oh, and I know that's a horrible thing to say, not to mention the fact we have a system where a doctor sees 40 patients. And if you think they're keeping up every night on the amount of data they need to keep up with to actually bring medicine 20 or 30 years, and so why aren't we using technology to help the doctors do the right thing? And by the way, why is it as easy to order a CAT scan as it is Nespresso coffee capsules from Amazon?
Yeah.
And it isn't. You know that.
No,
yeah.
it's incredibly difficult. But I think getting back to this spirit, I'll just give one anecdote. Like, since I've been here, having a big idea. Like, one of the things I'm really focused on in heart disease is that half the people who have heart attacks have never had presenting symptom. It's practically impossible to be able to do screening for heart disease in this country. But if you did that, you would absolutely eradicate premature death due to heart disease. 100%. Come in the city of Austin, I'm like, why don't we do this in Austin? Everybody's like, that's a fantastic idea. Let's go do it. So there's that kind of frontier mentality that I think it's going to take to disrupt healthcare. Like, I completely agree with Steve. I think we gotta, like, the existing system, I've seen systems all over the world. There's not a good system on the planet. And our system in the US is very, very challenged. And I think the people who are thinking about doing that in Austin with Del Med have the benefit of being able to do something fresh, not being encumbered by what else is going on in healthcare.
Chiming in with, thank you. Chiming in with the frontier. So for your question just a second ago, in terms of why not to hire AI completely remotely, I think some types of companies will need to see an interaction between the wet lab and the computational model. So CompBio is a real thing. It's, some of the experts need to sit at the intersection, and therefore there probably is an advantage to having a one place which is a nexus of the talent, although of course you can train anywhere, right? Like we train on the cloud. And another point about the frontier and to the kind of the discussion here, so some of the investors in Austin, not all of them, but some of them are very different than the standard VCs with very interesting mandates. To plug in another one of our investors, so Trust Ventures that sits in Austin, their mandate is to disrupt regulatory red tape. And I don't think you find many of those outside outside of Austin. There probably are some, but given the amount of VCs you're finding, one whose mandate is that is I think very telling. And each firm here does have usually it's more than just cash. So there's a real thesis behind it that is different, weird, as in keep Austin weird.
I think Sal's an N of one. An amazing,
Sorry, Sal's
an amazing N of one.
He is.
We can obviously go for a lot longer. I always kind of want to end with the same question on the podcast. We'll kind of go down the line. We'll frame it a little bit different than this. But what's next, Austin Bio and Health?
The next major company that disrupts medicine and brings us 20, 30 years advanced over the next year.
I'd say I think what's going to happen over the next 5 years and basically re-envisioning what healthcare, academic medicine can look like and bring that into a city that doesn't have it is going to be not just transformative for Austin, but it's going to be transformative for nationally, internationally.
So I don't have a crystal ball, but I know I'll be working really, really hard together with you, with Yanni, with others to try to make Austin into a real hub at the intersection of AI and biotech.
So what's next, Austin? We're glad you've joined us on this journey. Please subscribe at your favorite podcast catcher, leave us a review, and let your colleagues know about us. This will help us grow the podcast and continue bringing you unique interviews and insights. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.